In the episode Cornball, Star manages to get Buff Frog back to Mewny to go with her to a game of Cornball, a Mewman sport enjoyed by both Mewmans and monsters, which is exactly as chaotic as any other sporting event. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. She was helped in this process by Buff Frog's kids, who have grown even more since last time we saw them, and I enjoyed seeing them very much. I enjoyed seeing Buff Frog very much, but Buff Frog, despite getting to see his friend again and getting to see a Cornball game, which he hasn't seen in a while, isn't convinced that he should return to Mewny permanently, which is what Star wants. She wants him back because, man, he's a cool character, and I'm sure the fans would like to see him more. There's probably an in-universe reason, too, but that's the one I think the writers had going through their minds when they committed to this episode. And she plans to convince him by showing him not just the Cornball game, but the first Mewman Monster co-op Cornball game where they're going to have mixed teams and stuff. Theoretically, at least, because it turns out you actually pick your teams prior to the game starting, like in middle school gym class, which is just, that's an unfair thing to remind me of, Starverse's writers. How dare you? And of course, the human team captain and the monster team captain, they pick humans and monsters respectively. Star has to actually force them to mix things up. And it doesn't go well. People aren't liking it very much. The players aren't liking it very much. And people in the crowd don't seem to be liking it much more than they are. But there's a couple of subplots that are happening in the background of this episode. There's one with Marco and Kelly. Kelly, being a huge Cornball fan, is announcing the match. And Marco, to make sure he can help her with that, he learns most of the rules of Cornball very, very quickly, and it's so complicated that it almost drives me insane. They do a parody of one of those scenes where the guy who's been holed up in his office, putting the little pins with the strings attached to him up on the pegboard trying to solve a mystery, how he goes crazy over time. They did a parody of that kind of scene with Marco, and it was pretty funny. But there's another one that's far more relevant, and that's that the kids of the Mewmans and monsters who came to see the game, the kids that they brought with them, end up organizing their own Cornball game because they don't know the same prejudices that their parents do, at least not yet. I imagine some of their parents will get to some of them eventually. They end up playing a true mixed game and have a lot of fun with it, and for a while the parents are able to overlook their differences, though they're still prejudiced. Their prejudice hasn't just gone away immediately. But this camaraderie and cooperation and friendship between all the kids does lead Star and Buff Frog to the realization that while the current generation may be, as a whole, a lost cause, the next one isn't, and I think the show is saying something about where it's going with this, but I'll talk about that in a second. And Buff Frog does decide to stay on Mewny. This did inspire him enough that he decides to stay, which is great, because that definitely means they're going to use him in upcoming episodes, and I do like seeing him. I like his character a lot. I think, though, that the focus of this episode, aside from being pretty cute, the kids in this were pretty cute. The Marco and Kelly stuff was pretty cute. It was a pretty cute episode. It had some funny moments. It looked cool. Cornball looks cool. But I think the primary focus of this episode was to make it obvious to the audience that the show is not going to end on humans and monsters getting along as a whole, but it is going to end on the hope that things will improve with coming generations. And that's a good direction for the season to go, I think. It would be really nice if by the end of this season everybody was getting along with everyone, but that's just not realistic, and this show is trying to be fairly realistic in terms of characters, attitudes, and action. Like, there's no way to reset an entire generation of adults who exist in this world the way they reset Meteora, for example. So it makes sense that by the end of this, the Mewman and monster adults will be able to tolerate each other, but they won't really be friends, at least not the majority of them. And as a vessel for that message, the episode was fine. It wasn't anything special or anything, but it was a perfectly entertaining episode. It was, as I said before, nice to see Buff Frog again. That does bump it up a couple of points, I think, but overall, it was pretty much an average episode of Starverses. That said, of course, I'd like to know what you guys think of Cornball if you have seen it. Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over in my Discord, link in the description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.